So, good morning, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Coming Home to You network. I have the lovely Nicola Lowry with me, and she has got an amazing story. I've been observing her over the last couple of years, and her transformation is purely transformational. She is such a wonderful, bright soul, and as you can see, the lovely radiant light shining behind her, she is a pure angel. So, Nicola, tell me, I've been watching you, and like I said, you have a wonderful story.
Yeah.
How did it all start?
Well, it all started really with my daughter, my eldest one. She's now 27. She'll be 28 next month on summer solstice. And she was paralyzed in lockdown. Um, so her left arm was stuck to her body like this, folded over, and she couldn't feel her legs. So she walked like a puppet on a string. So when I say paralyzed, she could still walk, but she had no feeling.
Right.
Um, and because of the world closing its gates, I don't even like mentioning the C word personally for me, they were just going to leave her on pre-gabling. I worked in spinal injuries for about 8 years, and mother's intuition, I just knew there was something more to it. And, she was really struggling. Anyway, the power of prayer. I'm a great believer of the power of prayer. I sat on the doorstep in the back garden. It was early hours in the morning. I'm going to say 3, 4 o'clock. And I prayed to my dad in spirit, so my dad's in spirit, to God, whoever was listening to me, really, that was that powerful. If there's a God up there, please answer my prayers, because I can't sit back as a mother and watch my daughter being paralyzed. Anyway, blow me. So the journey then begun. I went to bed, I got a couple of hours sleep, and I woke up with a message to go private. So to go and demand an MRI scan, a copy of the disc, and go private to a beautiful gentleman called Ralph Sutton, who is a cryo practitioner. And I'm like, right, okay. So I listened to that message. And people, obviously, within the world, within friendships, were going, you'll never get it. You'll never get an MRI scan. You'll never get a copy of a disc. And I never listened to that. And I did it. So I took a private, I went an MRI scan. We got a copy of the disc, and we took a private to the cryo practitioner, Ralph. Anyway, give acupuncture in the base of the spine. So I was never on a spiritual journey. I always believed there was something out there. But to me, this was the awakener. And they give acupuncture in the base of the spine, which obviously is your base chakra, your root chakra. And she could come out and she could cuddle me for the first time in 10 days. So she could lift that left arm up and put her arms around her mum and squeeze me tight. And that still, emotions are still there, because to me, there's no price on that. But then what happened after, when they give her the acupuncture in the base of the spine, she had a full blown spontaneous Kundalini awakening, which was horrific to watch as a mother. There was dark in her eyes. Teagan will probably watch this live. She went out, she spat in my face, she threw a kettle at my head. She was like, the only way I could describe it is the dark side. It's like she was possessed. It's like it wasn't her. And then all of a sudden, through this journey, she started shouting things at me about my father in spirit. He had a fishing boat accident. He broke his left ankle at sea. Loads of this stuff was coming out of her mouth. And I couldn't answer her because within childhood, my dad wasn't the best father on the earth plane. He was very abusive. I'd witnessed him raping my mother as a child. The beatings were beyond beatings. And I had to actually go back to my dad's side of the family for the first time in 22 and a half years of contact since my dad passed away. And everything my daughter said was true. So then I realised, obviously, she's a psychic. She has these abilities. She can see, hear, feel all of this. But before that, I'll just go back a little bit. There was a time, so I've got a beautiful grandson. He's 10 now, Jaden. He was 5 at the time. And I can remember being in my daughter's kitchen after she had the acupuncture. And I could hear whistling as clear as day. I could hear this whistling. And I actually thought it was my grandson. So I'm shouting, Jay boy, are you whistling? And he come through and he stood in the kitchen doorway and he said, no, it's the man in the corner and he whistles all the time. It's annoying, isn't it? And my little grandson walked off. My dad was a fisherman and my dad used to whistle all the time. So that's when I knew the presence of my father was there. My body went goosebumps, the back of my neck went cold. And I actually thought I was cracking up. I can't deny that. I was thinking, Jesus, what the hell is happening? And this was before, obviously, Teagan gave me the message from my father. She was, oh my God, she was cracking eggs in the back garden, digging holes. She was walking in a knickers and bra around the estate where we live with a cross in her hand, chanting. She'd gone through horrific, beyond horrific. She even nearly got sectioned. So on the journey as well, which is quite vital, is I worked in mental health for 5 years. So I knew about a lot of the people in the mental health situation and the work environment. And they were going to section her because of the voices in her head. Okay, so she wanted to kill herself for 3 days. She wanted to take her own life through the awakening. As a mother, obviously, I supported and loved her through that. And so did my mum, you know. And when they went to section her, she actually gave a reading to the nurse. So she actually threw her voice to the nurse. Anyway, I actually phoned up and I said, listen, I can't explain what's happening because I couldn't explain it at first, you know. I said, but please don't section my daughter. Don't give her any pharmaceutical medications. Just put her back into my care and I'll deal with it, you know. So then when she come back into my care, that's when she went at me, you know, the spitting in my face, you know, it was horrific and I could see like a dark energy around her, you know. But from that, you know, it awakened us as a family massively, as you can imagine. You know, my daughter is no longer paralyzed. We went down the holistic side of therapy. So my daughter's had acupuncture, she sees a cryo practitioner, and she's also had MFR therapy, which is myofascial release therapy, who is John Barnes in America based. So the gentleman, we're very lucky, James Elwood. I give him a massive big shout out because he was the one that got accused of being a witch doctor on my journey. Um, but he helps people with the body. Okay, so obviously, when we carry emotional trauma, trapped energy within our body, it also comes out in physical. So he dealt with the physical side. So he helped Teagan on that route. And then, and then my ex-husband of 22 and a half years, so I was married for 22 and a half years, got three beautiful children. He made me choose between him and Teagan.
Already learned.
So I ended a 22 and a half years coercive controlling marriage. The only thing he never did within that marriage was hit me. So I've gone through rapes, the abuse, you know, the emotional, just trauma beyond trauma, you know, the put downs, you're never going to get anybody, all that. And the best thing I ever did, so the best thing for me, for Teagan to have the awakening and for me to get a choice, there's no choice. My children will always come first in my life. So I ended that marriage. And then he took me on a witch hunt, okay, which nobody likes talking about in these day and ages, in this lifetime. So he took me through the corrupt family court system. He accused me of being into witchcraft, into a cult. I lie in a bed naked with the witch doctor, who is the MFR therapist. I'm a heroin addict and I needed sectioned. And they believed him, you know, so they believed that. So through that journey of going through family courts, I was in family courts for 18 months. I had, I'm going to say, 12 court cases with lies and allegations and lies and allegations after allegation. Um, the two things, though, because I always say, you know, we all, excuse my French, because I do swear, you know, we all fuck up in life. You know, if you can own your own fuck ups in life, you can grow from them. Okay. So the two things where I fucked up within life, I wanted to move away. Okay, so I wanted to run away to Scotland, away from the abuse. I was walking around the streets. I was getting shouted at. It was like going back into the 1600s, walking down the street and getting stoned, spat at, verbally abused. And it was taking its toll on my body. And so that went against me because I wanted to move to Scotland. I'm going out of a duration, so I'm going from England to Scotland. So my ex-husband accused me of kidnapping his son, and I'm taking his son away from him. Okay, so that's one thing that went against me. The second one that went against me, I was single for 7 months. I met a man, obviously still vulnerable, but not realizing how vulnerable I was. And he was on what we call a Clare's Law. So he'd been done for domestic violence. Okay, now I don't judge people, you know, so I don't care about somebody's past. It's how
Mm,
they represent themselves to me now. Okay.
yeah.
So he made me feel safe. So this is what lesson I learned from this gentleman. And because of his history of violence, I suppose, it just made me feel safe because I was getting everything coming at me. It's like that protection. He made me laugh for the first time in a long time. You know, we had fun. But when my ex-husband raised him within the family courts and said that it was on Clare's Law, I knew that relationship could go no further, you know, because I was fighting for my son and they used that against me too. So I ended that relationship, you know. So they're the two things where I had to learn hard lessons from. I stayed single for 3.5 years after that, as you can imagine, to do the inner work of the healing. But through the court cases and the family courts, I went down a rabbit hole, you know. So I learned through family courts, child trafficking is rife. Okay. They take innocent babies away from mothers that have been through abuse in their lives and they'll use it against them. So say like you get a mother that's gone through social services and been in the care system, they'll use that against the mother just to take the baby away. So the rabbit holes that I went down were horrific and I had to come back out of the rabbit holes. I had one solicitor Can I name them? Yeah, I'm going to name them because I'm out of the court case. Philip Scott. He sent me somebody else's private medical records. So as I'm going through my own trauma through courts, I opened this email one morning. Now, I didn't like him anyway. I actually said that he had small man syndrome, but that's just my personal opinion. He just didn't listen to me. He didn't listen to my voice. And when a woman's not heard, it makes us worse. Even when a man's not heard, it makes me worse. And I opened this email, and it was about a child that had been abused by the mother and the father. And it was just horrific. But what it did is it triggered an emotion inside me because I was abused by my father and mentally by my mother. So it come back. Do you know what I mean? So as much as my mum's healing now, and I understand her, like she was never cuddly. There was no hugs, there was no love, but she was
Right.
living with her own trauma, and I've got compassion for that now. Growing up as a child, I didn't, I was
Yeah.
angry,
Yeah.
lashed out. So that I sacked him, so I said, you know what, I don't want you as a solicitor. I don't trust you. How can I trust you? You're sending my emails to people too.
Mm.
So I took that further within the courts. I tried to go to like Ofsted and say that this is wrong. He should be punished for doing something like that. There was no
Absolutely.
punishment. He carries on being a family solicitor, which shocks me within the system. But as one door closes, another one always opens. So Emma Hall, a massive big shout out to this beautiful lady. She come into my life as my new solicitor. She was the vice president for the Pagan Federation Church. Okay. She's a Reiki master. So she does all the witchy work and the druid side. And I'd never even heard of the word pagan, so that's how oblivious I was to life. For me, God is within. So I've never looked for validation of a God on an outside. I've always believed that God's within us. But when I realised, for the witch hunt for me, I can always remember a part of the journey because there's that much, to say. Um, my ex-husband had put in a paperwork within the system saying that we're a pillar of the community. We go to church. We're christened. Boom, 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 right? And I'm reading this paperwork, and I went, "Is he for real?" I said, if he is such a strong Christian man as a family, why are they using God's children to try and destroy another God's child? And that's what I said to Emma. And Emma went, Nicola, I'm going to send you some paperwork and I want you to sit and read it. Now, reading is not a speciality of mine, so I don't read books. Then I sat and read this paperwork. And it was mentioned about in the 1600s, the Christians had taken over of persecuting women and burning us, drowning us, silencing us in whichever way. And when I read it, I'm like, oh my God, I'm actually on a witch hunt in this lifetime, in this century. And I phoned her back up. I said, I want a fucking witch hunt. And she went, you are? Yeah. I said, well, there's one thing I'm not going to do, Emma. I never once on this journey did I ever want to take my own life. Even though that I believe, so my belief, that's what they wanted. They wanted to push me to my darkest days, take my own life. I was too strong for that. I was too protected for that. And my kids were my world. I'm not going to leave my kids. So I said, and then she said to me, Nicola, the family courts is a game. It's just a game. You know, are you in it to win it? Or are you going to lose? And I went, well, if he's going to play a game, he better play it fucking hard because love is more powerful than money.
Yeah.
And I come back fighting. So I did come back fighting. Through the system, though, I had to have a psychological assessment by a psychologist. Louisa Williams, I will name her as well because she wasn't actually used in the courts. So we set off on a Zoom call. Everything was done obviously by Zoom because of the C words, so it was nothing was in person. And we sat down and the first thing she said to me was, I'm going to turn my camera off because I don't like looking at myself. Okay. Now within that moment, I was learning to love me. So Lou Martin had suggested mirror work, looking in the mirror. So I was learning to look at the mirror and love what I see. And I actually turned around and said, no, can you keep your camera on, please? Because one, I want to see who I'm talking to. And two, every woman should love what they see. That
Beautiful.
triggered her. Okay. So I knew that triggered her now. And then she started asking me lots of questions on psychic abilities, crystal healing, walking barefoot in nature. And in the end, I actually stopped it. I said, you know what? I'm going to stop you. I said, because you're asking me lots of questions on my beliefs. So I feel like I'm being persecuted or penalised for what I believe in. I said, we're not doing a religious assessment. We're doing a psychological assessment. So do you want to go back to the basics? I'm fighting for my son. I'm not fighting for my daughter. She didn't like that either. Anyway, cut a long story short, she failed me. She said that I had delusional dysfunctional disorder, that I had psychotic behaviour, that she thinks that I'm high on drugs, meaning heroin and cocaine, because obviously the allegations my ex-husband put in, and that my boy should be with his father and that I should only have supervised contact. So they took my boy off me and they gave him to his father for 10 months. When they took my boy off me, I look back now, that was the hardest day of having what I call a breakthrough reality. So it wasn't a breakdown. So even though I completely broke down, and I mean, I broke, I smashed my house up, I was punching oak doors. The anger that was coming through me was anger I'd never felt before in my life. It's like something could just be ripped away. Um, I wasn't allowed to speak to my boy. I wasn't allowed to say goodbye to my boy. He got taken off my friend, Helen Hamill, my beautiful supervised contact. So when he got taken off me, the social worker, Lisa, I call her Lisa Shithouse, but we'll call her Lisa Stonehouse. She was a bit like, have you ever seen Matilda, where you've got Miss Trunchbull and you've got Honey? To my boy, I described her as Miss Trunchbull. Okay, so she was the hag and the dark side and stuff. And she was trying to force me to have a Zoom FaceTime with my son, supervised by his father, who had raped me, abused me, lied, and was dragging me all through that. And I refused. I refused that FaceTime contact. One, I wasn't strong enough at that time. Two, I didn't even want to see him, never mind talk to him or be present with his energy. The social worker turned around and says, do you know how much emotional abuse you'll cause your son if you don't take the Zoom? Right. I said, well, you know what? My emotions are actually more important right now and my mental health. So I will do supervised phone call where I can hear him, but I'm not doing a Zoom. And that's how it started. So we did the phone call, but when you can just feel somebody's energy is like watching over
Yeah.
my boy. My boy must have felt, Zachary must have felt so uncomfortable with that. It's not he was 11, 12 years old. So the first one went okay. He was talking to me and everything like that. The second one, again, mother's intuition. Um, so I just got back. My ex-mother-in-law, who I call the flying monkey. Okay, so she's the one that paid £70,000 for the family court case. 70
Oh,
grand they paid. And there was one time my little boy wouldn't go to school. I mean, he's not so little now. He's 16. He's a beautiful grown man. But he wouldn't go to school. He was emotionally unstable. He was very erratic, you know what I mean, with his emotions. He didn't know whether he was coming or going. He'd witnessed his sister going through what she went through, and then he's seen his family fall apart. So I phoned up school and I said, listen, my boy won't be in today. He's not ill, but he's emotionally unwell and he needs his mum and he needs special time. So I took him out walking barefoot. So I do a lot of barefoot walking, a lot of grounding on the ley lines, on the land. It was absolutely pissing down with rain. We both got soaking wet. And my boy had his Birkenstocks on, so we walk around in Birkenstocks anyway. And as we were walking, he said to me, Mum, I'm really worried about Nanny. I said, why, darling? What's the matter? And he said, she's told me that she doesn't want to be here anymore. And she wants to leave Susie, which is a dog, looking after Grandad. Well, you can imagine the mother's emotions. I was absolutely raging, to give that guilt of her own not wanting to be here on this earth plane to my son. How dare you? How fucking dare you? So I emailed her. I said, listen, if you don't want to be here on the earth plane, crack on, but don't give your guilt to my son. So I am very brutal in how I come forward, do you know what I mean? But I'm also very honest, I'm sorry that you're feeling that way, but don't you dare. So then we come back off this walk and my boy said, Mum, and we're in Asda. I'm absolutely penniless broke because there was financial abuse there. And he wanted to get his nan a garden gnome. And I'm saying, Zach, really? I'm really struggling financially. And he gives me these big, beautiful blue eyes and said, but he'll make Nan feel really happy, Mum. So my kind side comes out. I said, go on then, go and get the garden gnome. Go and get Grandad one as well. So he got two garden gnomes. She reported me to the police for leaving a witch's ornament on the doorstep
oh, jeez.
because it was October time, so it was Halloween. So obviously there were Halloween norms, but I literally had the police knocking on my door and asking me about witches' ornaments. And I'm like, what the fuck? So I laugh about it now, but back then, you can imagine again, I can't react because if I react, I look like I'm going crazy, I'm going mental, I'll lose my son. But the day that I lost my son, so I'll go forward again. And this one time we were on a contact of talking and he just wasn't himself. So he wasn't like answering me, he was just going, And I went, Zach, I said, where are you, darling? I said, because I feel like you're being supervised by more than one person in the room. And he said, I'm at my nan's. I said, right, okay. I said, so you've got your nan, your granddad, and your dad all around you. Correct me. And he went, yeah. I said, right, Zach. I said, I'm going to end this telephone conversation. I said, because one, I don't like making you feel uncomfortable, and that's not what life's about. I said, so do you understand why I'm going to end the phone conversation? And he went, yeah. I said, but before you go, Zach, there's one thing I'm going to tell you. I'm never going to stop fighting for you. So don't think you're there permanently, because you're not. Right. I said, but what I want you to do now, I want you to put your fingers in your ears. Now, whether my boy put his fingers in his ears, that was his choice yet again. And that's when I went. And I said, you know what? You freaking listen to this loud on speaker. And I said, how's your witch's ornament, Caroline? You know, the garden gnome that your grandson bought you because you want you to not be here on this earth plane, but you think it's a witch's ornament. Who's delusional? I said, and as for you, Nathan, you think dragging me through these family courts, accusing me of being on heroin, mentally unstable, and a really shit mum, why didn't you bring that up 20 years ago? Do you know what I mean? I said, because love is more powerful than money. So you carry on fighting and wasting your money, and I'll carry on fighting with the love of the mother. And I ended that conversation. But when I ended it, my whole body went into this trauma response. So I fell to the floor. My body wouldn't stop shaking. It just wouldn't, like, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I can't cope with this again. And through my journey, I was having MFR therapy, myofascial release. I was having MFR therapy once a week. He wasn't charging me at that time because I had no finances. And to me, he was an angel, he was a God gifting angel. And also DVL Pandya. So I'll give him a big shout out too. So considering at that time in my life, I really hated men. And I know it's a strong word, it's hate, but I just hated men's energies. And I'm thinking, is every man like this? And as a woman, I went against the male energy, the masculine energy. But God sent me two male teachers. I'm thinking, this is interesting. Do you know what I mean? And I couldn't have got any better male teachers. I am very, very blessed every day. DVL Pandya, he answered so many questions of voices going on in my head. I was getting names sometimes like Michael and Mary, but I didn't know who they were at that time. And then he answered, so Archangel Michael, Mother Mary coming in for the love, Archangel Michael coming in for the power and the strength. And then Callie come in as well, so I could vision them, and I'm like, all right, okay, now I understand. So then I used to sit with myself a lot with on the journey. So when Zach got taken off me for 10 months, what it taught me was they took Zach off me so Zach could see for himself what the other side were like. Because when two parents split up, one stays bitter, the other gets better. Or, on a brilliant case, two will get better and do what's best for the child. I chose to get better. Okay. He chose to stay bitter. And that's his journey, not mine. So I disconnected from all that and I did 10 months of deep in soul work. Because I never had Zach, I had the chance to do that. So if I had Zach, I wouldn't have been able to do that. I wouldn't have been able to, I lost my house. It got repossessed. I had to sell it. I lost family members. He'd gone from my brother, who was my best friend. He knew exactly what he was doing. But some people say, but does he really know what he was doing? He knew exactly what he was doing. So within the court case, when I had the psychological assessment and they failed me, I had to have my solicitor come back with seven. So my solicitor was absolutely raging because, like, she was saying that crystal healing's not real, Reiki's all illusion. Well, it's the worst person to say it to when your solicitor's actually a crystal healer, the silly thing. So she come back with 7 questions. That psychologist, she went off permanently sick. She won't answer them. So it didn't even come into court or anything else. And then I had to have another psychological assessment. So being under a psychiatrist, going through what I was going through, I can always remember going to the psychiatrist and they've diagnosed me with this, this, and this, and this. And she went, and do you believe that, Nicola? I said, no, I don't. On that journey, obviously, I can take the CPTSD, okay, but I don't like living with the label. So I am on a healing journey. If I keep on saying, right, I am like this because I'm CPTSD, or I do this because that's just giving it an excuse for a way to behave. No, so I won't take that. I'm also diagnosed ADHD, but I also, for me, ADHD is a trauma of the brain. You can rewire that brain with self-healing, self-love, and self-work on self. The medication that they prescribe, and this is only my belief, okay? I believe it blocks us Okay, I believe it
Mm.
blocks your third eye. I believe it blocks your gifts of your magic that's within inside you. We're
Yeah.
not here to fit in. We're here to stand out. So within this world, I'm not here to fit in a box. Nobody could ever keep me silent, as you well gather with my voice. And God gifted me with that voice that I am grateful for. But I used to get told that I'm too loud, too confident, too this. Yeah, I am.
Yeah. Life has made you that way. You're just breaking up a little bit
To be
there.
this confident, to be this outside. I've learned
Mm.
not to react and use my. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
You
You're
still
good
there?
now. Yeah.
Yeah. Good to go. So I am confident within self. I haven't always been confident, but I am. So then I had to be supervised again for a further 7 weeks with my son and have another second psychological assessment by a man. Believe it or not. So another male comes into my life. And as soon as we'd done this psychological assessment, he was asking me all the questions about childhood abuse. So I was abused sexually as a child and, going through adulthood. And at the end of it, he had tears in his eyes, right? And he said to me, Nicola, I'm going to say this off record and then I'm going to go back to on record. And he says, can I just say your story is inspirational? It gives me goosebumps. It's brought tears to my eyes because I'm a father of children. And what you've been through is horrific. And what the system's done to you is horrific. And all I can do is say sorry. He says, now on record. So he presses his button because it's recorded. He said, your boy's coming home. He says, so in my report today, I am going to put that boy needs his mother just as what that mother needs her son. And
Love it.
that was the most powerful moment of a mother. And I got him back at the end of November and it was like we're in a hostel, but the things, some people, they go so far to try and destroy that gift of self. And I used to think on the journey it's because my daughter had an awakening and that's why I've gone on this witch hunt. I used to really strongly believe that. And it wasn't until like I don't know, 3 years ago. And I was like, oh my God, it had nothing to do with her. It's my gift they feared. It's me that they feared. And it's me that they wanted to destroy as well as my daughter. And I'm like, shit, who am I? So I went into that, who am I? And I also asked the question once as well, why have I been on a witch hunt in this lifetime? Why did I have to go through what I went through? I don't do it so much now because I always believe when we go, why me? We live in a victim mode. Okay.
Yeah.
When we go in a, why not me? Okay. Then we become into a healing modality. And I can remember getting on James's table, the MFR therapist, and I went back in a past life. Okay. So I set that intention before I went to the healing. And when I went on, I went back into the 1630s. I was a male on a horse in Germany, and I was authorising the killing of the women.
Right.
So when I seen it, so I see things, I vision. Okay, I come back out of this healing, I'm going like that, because of what I'd visioned. And I said to James, "Oh my God, I killed women in a past life." And James went, "And then you wonder why you're on a witch life in this lifetime." I was like, "Fucking hell, karma's what? Karma's real." And I had to learn to forgive that past part of soul self and piece it
Mm.
together. But it made me realize that why I had to go through what I went through, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
the work that I do now, so I have the psychic abilities, I can see things happening, but sometimes I have to let go of the outcome. So I specialize when people say, "So what do you do then? How do you do what you do?" Truthfully, Declan, I don't fucking know. No, when I put so my stepdad, so I'll give him a big shout out, Brian, my stepdad. I can remember saying to him, Dad, my body feels weird. When I put my hands on people, I can see what they've been through, or I can see the pain or the unwanted energies in the body. So I can't give like the diagnosis, but I can see the trauma. And I said, do you think I'm going mad? Right. And my stepdad was like, no. I said, why? He said, because my grandfather was a psychic surgeon.
There you go.
Right. He used to put his hands on and travel the world and heal with his hands. And I've never heard the
Mm.
word psychic surgeon. I'd never heard the word healing hands, on this journey. But then I learned like a few things off my dad. I said to my dad, so why haven't you told us this before? My stepdad's been in my life since we were 7. And he's like, well, it's not really a topic of conversation. He said, and not only that, my grandma was a witch. She used to do all the tea leaf reading. And then everyone started opening up. And I'm like, so I'm not going crazy. And he said, no, Nicola, you're not. It's part of your healing journey. So
Yeah.
my grandfather, John, obviously it's my stepdad's granddad, I often call him up because my dream, even though I know I do it, I want to do it to a more in depth, is to be a psychic surgeon.
Mm.
So when my hands go on people's bodies, it's like my hands sinking.
Yeah.
Okay. So I see, you might say unwanted energies, entities, dynamic attachments. Everyone labels it in a different way. So for me, people think being on a spiritual path is all magical and unicorns and light and love and dung, but it really isn't. You've got to really dig deep into your own core wounds and shift shit. And there's dark as well, because without the dark, there's no light
Yeah.
you know
Absolutely.
but people don't like talking about the darkness. so i
No.
see so I see dynamic. So when my hands go on people's bodies, it's like they'll give me clippets. So I'll give one example. The other day I had a client and I could see this little girl of 6 years old being whacked with a belt buckle side, and I could see it. So then I asked that vision to be taken away, because obviously I don't want to see it and be
Yeah.
with it. But then I give the message to the person that's on my table and say, I can see a 6-year-old little girl, I can see a belt. And then all of a sudden I see the energy coming up. Okay. So then my hands remove, okay, or it comes through into my body. So some people use in shamanic healing, some people will use a power animal to remove it, or a crystal to remove it. Everyone has their own little toolkits. I've never actually been taught to do what I do. I just channel and listen. Um, it comes into my body and I channel it out my body. So whatever's in there, it comes into my body and I give it all the love and the light that it needs. And it'll either go
Beautiful.
up to source or down to earth. I'll ask it which way it wants to go. And one of my friends says, you do realise, Nicola, not everybody uses the body. And I said, well, I didn't know anything else. So I didn't know anything else on how to work. So I've never done um, the only two courses really I've done is transformational healing with the beautiful Patricia Angrove, and the Reiki, which obviously I think a lot of people have done the Reiki healing. But it's like that I just allow God's source, the higher beings, to come through my body to work with me for the other person's highest good.
Brilliant.
So
Yeah.
people say to me, so what certificates have you got then? And I'm going, well, hang on a minute. I'll just dial up to God and I'll ask God to sign my paperwork off and then I'll give it to you. Because I
Beautiful.
don't have no certificates, I
Yeah.
didn't do well in school. I had no certificates through school, but I've got the passion, so I've got my own journey, my own knowledge that obviously I've been through life. And to me, that's more powerful than any certification. So
Absolutely.
not no certificates. And every time I want to go for a certificate, thinking, well, if I'm going to do this work on this earth plane, sure, I need a certificate, because it's a big thing that we all go for. I need that education. And then spirit will come through and then, no, you don't. You need to be
Yeah.
one that's showing people that you can do it without a certificate.
Exactly.
Hundreds of years ago, when people were doing the healing on the land, they didn't have a certificate.
No.
So why do I need it now? And
Yeah.
and there's no better teacher than yourself. So as much as we
Exactly.
get the teachers in our lives, nobody can teach you something that you can teach yourself.
That's it.
So yeah, the journey's been absolutely brilliant, Declan. 5 years ago I was 6 stone 8. I was dark. I think you've seen pictures on my social media. And it's actually the 30th of May this month. It's been 5 years since I ended my marriage. Um, so in that court case, I passed my psychological assessment. I passed my drug test. Okay, I'm not a heroin addict, but I never judge anybody that does take heroin because they're masking their own trauma. But I'm also not an angel, even though I am now. I have taken cocaine in my life. I was addicted to cannabis for 32 years of my life. I never touched alcohol because my dad was an alcoholic, so I'm grateful for that. He put me off alcohol for life. Um, but I've been clean from cocaine 4 years. I've been clean from cannabis coming up 4 years. And I did that by myself. I had no interventions. I had no, counselling to come off the drugs. I just did cold turkey. I was also on pharmaceutical medication, which sometimes for me is actually worse than street drugs. And they're just as
Yeah.
bad. I was on pharmaceutical medication, diazepam, fluoxetine, citraplam, you name it, throughout 27 years of my life. I actually did cold turkey on that as well. And doctors actually said to me, you do realise, if you do cold turkey, you're risking your life. And I said, well, you know what? I'd rather do that because I feel dead inside anyway. So I felt dead
Yeah.
inside. So the way I think, it's like I cracked open. So I had to die, not physically, but mentally, to be reborn again. So that's why I love telling my story, Declan.
Yeah.
I love the fact that I've had to go through all this. My boy still, so even though I've got my son back full time, he's doing his exams actually. So Zach, if you see this, big shout out to you doing your school exams. He's in my care full time. He sees his dad, but only when it's convenient to father. So he's not a constant, persistent all the time, but he's starting to see his dad that little bit more, which is good for Zach. Zach needs to learn his own path and his own journey.
Absolutely.
He sees his nan, who he absolutely idolizes, and that's his journey, that's his life. The only thing I struggle with sometimes, and it's one. So forgiveness for me is massive. Forgive yourself, forgive others, because then you're breaking the energy ties. But my ex-mother-in-law is probably the one that's been the hardest to still shift, because she's the big impact. And the fact she was the one that paid the 70 grand, and
Yeah.
she was the one that actually disowned my daughter. So once my daughter had her awakening, um, even though Nathan brought her up for 22 and a half years of her life, they just disowned her. My ex-mother-in-law just disowned her as if
Yeah.
she's nothing. So rejection is huge. And then still have contact with the other two. And it's like,
Yeah.
wow. So, but you can never ask yourself, how can they sleep at night? So that is a question I ask. How can they sleep at night knowing what they're doing? That's not my shit. That's their own, you
That's
know.
theirs. Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm just there to support Teagan. Teagan's probably been the hardest one to struggle with it all. Obviously going through what she's been through, but as a family, we've all come back together so close.
Brilliant.
So my middle child, Kelsey, beautiful. When we split up, she went for the love of the money. Dad bought her a brand
Yeah.
new car, Nanny bought her
Yeah.
plastic
Yeah.
illustration. The only thing I had to give was love and truth. I didn't have no money. And eventually, after 16 months, she's seen the light herself and come back into my life. And when they come back into my life, they turned against her for a little while. Where now they've all, Kelsey and Teagan have got the voice. So they've
Right.
got the voice. My boy is so sensitive, so placid. He still likes to please people by keeping people happy, but he's only 16. But he daredn't speak up because he fears rejection. So
Yeah.
because he's watched the nan disown, okay,
Yeah.
there's that fear if he was to speak up, he'd be disowned too, you
Yeah.
know. So yeah, so when Teagan connects to spirit, her ear moves up and down, which is unique. When my boy connects to spirit, his ear moves up and down. Okay, our hands also change colour. So Zach, when he tunes into energies, he doesn't do it so much anymore. He did it a lot when he obviously was going through supervised and stuff. But his hands go blue.
Mm.
So that connects to ley lines or energies. His hands turn blue, which also James Elwood, the MFR therapist, do. So he talks to the trees and communicates with the land. So it was lucky that Zach had seen James's hands turn blue. So then when his hands turn blue, it wasn't so much of a freak show.
You
My
know what's
hands
going on.
don't turn blue. My body's like a pendulum. So when I walk land, my body will guide on where I need to be, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
my hands don't turn blue. My hands will pulsate. So when I'm tuning in on my hands on the earth, I feel them pulsate. It's the only way I can describe it. So we're all beautiful, unique, divine beings with magic inside us, but it's learning to use that magic for the highest good and the right of others.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
What a powerful story, and what a powerful inspiration you are. And yes, that psychologist was right. You are a wonderful inspiration, a wonderful guide for everybody.
that's what he
Um,
said. Yeah, yeah.
and it's our darkest days that show us our greatest magic and our greatest love, our greatest being. And boy, have you got that spades.
And you
What a
find out who
wonderful,
you are.
yeah, yeah,
When
yeah.
you're going through them darkest days. Even before I ended my marriage, I used to say, God, is this all to life? Is this it? Is
Mm,
it what I'm here for? Married, doing palliative care. I used to do 70 hours a week. I loved doing the palliative care, by the way. It's a job that I absolutely adored doing. But it's like I couldn't do it anymore.
yeah,
So when I went through it, my last beautiful lady, Isabel Raven, 93, small and feisty, really big mouth, so opinionated. She's got so many memories of myself in her. But yeah, she was my last client that I looked after till the end. And then after that, I had to stop working completely. I couldn't do anything for anybody else until I actually healed myself and
yeah.
filled up my own cup. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I understand
yeah.
that bit, yeah. Yeah.
So
Nicola,
yeah,
what a wonderful story. I'm going to stop the recording now. That was absolutely brilliant.
thank
Uh,
you.
if if people are inspired, how can they get in touch with you, or would you want them to get in touch with you?
Oh God, yeah. So I do my healing through Zoom. I can do my healing through Zoom. Even just holding that safe space for anybody as well. Obviously anybody that's having any awakenings or going through a dark night of the soul. Um, I'm very, very knowledgeable about that one because obviously I've had to witness what I've seen.
Exactly.
I have two pages. So obviously I've got Nicola Lowry on Facebook. You can get hold of me quite easily on there. And obviously I do lives on there as well, which I think is inspiring sometimes for people to hear if they're having a shit day. And I've also set up another page, but I'm just plugging that at the minute, called The Power of
Right.
Touch.
Beautiful.
Um, so yeah, the power of touch. Obviously, everybody needs a hug. So when the
Yeah.
system tries to stop you from hugging, they try to stop the connection.
Exactly. So
Yeah,
Nicola's links will be on the comments below. So please feel free. What a powerful inspiration. What a powerful story. And as you can hear, she's got a love to offer. So people who are feeling stuck, who are going through something, please reach out to Nicola and have a conversation, and hopefully she'll be able to get you back on the track again. Thank you very much. You've been watching Nicola Lowry and Declan Kavanagh on the Coming Home to You network.